Enigma renderings, where stories whisper through shadows.
Greetings, listeners of the unseen, and welcome back to Enigma renderings, where stories whisper through shadows. For those learning English, let this be your companion, where language immerses you through sound, tension, and silence. You're listening to Enigma renderings, your home for cinematic storytelling in English. Our journey began with a single idea: to breathe new life into timeless tales. Stories that once lived in Bengal, Tamil, Hindi, and many other tongues, carried into English with voice, emotion, and atmosphere. Stories are not bound to language. They travel, they transform, yet their soul remains. Tonight, we take another step forward. We move beyond modern retellings and into the heart of classic horror literature. A story that asks a dangerous question: what if your deepest wish were granted? Not through magic and wonder, but through consequence. Tonight's tale is The Monkey's Paw, written by W. Jacobs. First published in 1902, this haunting classic is not a story of ghosts or monsters, but of fate, of grief, and of the terrible price of interfering with what should never be changed. It is a story that reminds us some wishes are better left unspoken. So, dim the lights, slow your thoughts, let the world outside fade. Sit back, wear your headphones, and listen closely. And follow the voice into the shadows, into a tale of destiny, dread, and a cursed object that should have burned. This is The Monkey's Paw.
The night was cold and wet. Outside, wind pressed against the house. Inside the small parlor of Laburnum Villa, the blinds were drawn and the fire burned brightly. Father and son sat at a chessboard. Mr. White played with reckless confidence, risking his king again and again, placing it in sharp, unnecessary danger. The play was so bold that it even drew a quiet comment from the white-haired old lady knitting placidly by the fire. Having noticed a fatal mistake too late, Mr. White looked up, hoping to distract his son.
Hark at the wind.
Herbert did not look up from the board.
I'm listening. Check.
Mr. White hesitated, his hand poised above the pieces.
I should hardly think that he's come tonight.
Mate!
The words struck sharply. Mr. White burst out with sudden and unlooked-for irritation.
That's the worst of living so far out. Of all the beastly, slushy, out-of-the-way places to live in, this is the worst. The path's a bog, the road's a torrent. I don't know what people are thinking. I suppose because only 2 houses in the road are let, they think it doesn't matter.
Never mind, dear. Perhaps you'll win the next one.
Mr. White looked up sharply and caught a knowing glance passing between mother and son. The words he had meant to say died on his lips. and he hid a guilty grin in his thin gray beard.
There he is.
The gate banged loudly. Heavy footsteps approached the door. Mr. White rose at once with hospitable haste. As he opened the door, voices of mutual complaint drifted in, the guest lamenting the night as much as his host.
Tut tut.
She, as her husband entered the room, followed by a tall, burly man with sharp eyes and a ruddy face.
Sergeant Major Morris.
The sergeant major shook hands and took the seat offered by the fire. He watched contentedly as Mr. White brought out whiskey in tumblers and set a small copper kettle on the fire. By the third glass, his eyes had grown brighter. He squared his broad shoulders and began to talk. The little family listened with eager interest as he spoke of distant lands, of wild scenes and daring deeds, of wars and plagues and strange peoples.
21 years of it. When he went away, he was a slip of a youth in the warehouse. Now look at him.
You don't look to have taken much harm.
I'd like to go to India myself. Just to look around a bit, you know.
Better where you are.
He set down his empty glass and sighed softly.
I should like to see those old temples and fakirs and jugglers. What was that you started telling me the other day about a monkey's paw or something, Morris?
Nothing. Leastways, nothing worth hearing.
A monkey's paw?
The sergeant major hesitated, then spoke lightly.
Well, it's just a bit of what you might call magic, perhaps.
His three listeners leaned forward eagerly. The visitor, absent-mindedly, raised his empty glass to his lips, then set it down again. Mr. White quietly refilled it for him.
To look at, it's just an ordinary little paw, dried to a mummy.
He fumbled in his pocket, drew something out, and held it forward. Mrs. White shrank back with a grimace, but Herbert took it and examined it with open curiosity.
And what is there special about it?
He took the paw from his son, examined it closely, and placed it upon the table.
It had a spell put on it by an old fakir, a very holy man. He wanted to show that fate ruled people's lives, and that those who interfered with it did so to their sorrow. He put a spell on it, so that 3 separate men could each have 3 wishes from it.
There was something in his manner so impressive that the others became aware that their light laughter had jarred.
Well, why don't you have 3, sir?
The soldier regarded him in the way middle age is wont to regard presumptuous youth.
I have.
As he spoke, his blotchy face turned white.
And did you really have the 3 wishes granted?
I did.
The glass tapped softly against his strong teeth.
And has anybody else wished?
The first man had his 3 wishes, yes. I don't know what the first 2 were, but the third was for death. That's how I got the paw.
His tone was so grave that a hush fell upon the group.
If you've had your 3 wishes, it's no good to you now then, Morris. What do you keep it for?
The soldier shook his head.
Fancy, I suppose.
If you could have another 3 wishes, would you have them?
I don't know. I don't know.
He took the paw and, dangling it between his forefinger and thumb, suddenly threw it upon the fire. With a slight cry, Mr. White stooped down and snatched it off.
Better let it burn.
If you don't want it, Morris, give it to me.
I won't. I threw it on the fire. If you keep it, don't blame me for what happens. Pitch it on the fire again, like a sensible man.
Mr. White shook his head and examined his new possession closely.
How do you do it?
Sounds like the Arabian Nights. Don't you think you might wish for 4 pairs of hands for me?
Hold it up in your right hand and wish aloud. But I warn you of the consequences.
Her husband drew the talisman from his pocket. All 3 laughed, until the sergeant major, with a look of alarm, caught him sharply by the arm.
If you must wish, wish for something sensible.
Mr. White dropped it back into his pocket. He placed the chairs and motioned his friend to the table. In the business of supper, the talisman was partly forgotten, and afterward, the 3 sat listening in an enthralled fashion to a second installment of the soldier's adventures in India. The door closed behind their guest, just in time for him to catch the last train.
If the tale about the monkey's paw is not more truthful than those he has been telling us, we shan't make much out of it.
Did you give him anything for it, Father?
She regarded her husband closely.
A trifle.
He colored faintly as he spoke.
He didn't want it, but I made him take it. And he pressed me again to throw it away.
Likely! Why, we're going to be rich, and famous, and happy. Wish to be an emperor, Father, to begin with. Then you can't be henpecked.
He darted round the table, laughing, pursued by the indignant Mrs. White, armed with an antimacassar. Mr. White drew the paw from his pocket and eyed it dubiously.
I don't know what to wish for, and that's a fact. It seems to me I've got all I want.
If you only cleared the house, you'd be quite happy, wouldn't you?
He rested his hand lightly on his father's shoulder.
Well, wish for £200 then. That'll just do it.
Smiling shamefacedly at his own credulity, Mr. White held up the talisman. His son, wearing a solemn expression, slightly marred by a wink toward his mother, sat down at the piano.
I wish for £200.
A fine crash from the piano greeted the words, broken by a shuddering cry from the old man. It moved! His wife and son rushed toward him. He glanced at the object lying on the floor.
As I wished, it twisted in my hands like a snake.
Well, I don't see the money.
He picked it up and placed it back on the table.
And I bet I never shall.
It must have been your fancy, Father.
Mr. White shook his head.
Never mind, though. There's no harm done. But it gave me a shock all the same.
They sat down by the fire again. while the two men finished their pipes. Outside, the wind rose higher than ever. The old man started nervously at the sound of a door banging upstairs. A silence, unusual and depressing, settled upon all three. It lasted until the old couple rose to retire for the night.
I expect you'll find the cash tied up in a big bag in the middle of your bed.
He paused, then added lightly,
And something horrible squatting on top of the wardrobe, watching you as you pocket your ill-gotten gains.
Later, Herbert sat alone in the darkness, gazing into the dying fire. Faces seemed to form in the embers. The last face was so horrible, so simian, that he stared at it in amazement. It grew so vivid that, with a small, uneasy laugh, he reached for a glass of water to throw over it. His hand closed instead upon the monkey's paw. With a little shiver, he wiped his hand on his coat and went up to bed. In the brightness of the wintry sun next morning, as it streamed across the breakfast table, Mr. White laughed at his fears. There was an air of plain, everyday wholesomeness about the room, something it had lacked the night before. The dirty, shriveled little paw lay tossed upon the sideboard with a carelessness that showed how little faith remained in its supposed powers.
I suppose all old soldiers are the same. The idea of our listening to such nonsense. How could wishes be granted in these days? And even if they could, how could £200 hurt you, Father?
Might drop on his head from the sky.
Morris said the things happened so naturally that you might, if you wished, put it all down to coincidence.
Well, don't break into the money before I come back. I'm afraid it'll turn you into a mean, avaricious man, and we shall have to disown you.
His mother laughed, followed him to the door, and watched him down the road. When she returned to the breakfast table, she was very much amused at her husband's credulity. Yet this did not prevent her from hurrying to the door at the postman's knock, nor from speaking rather sharply of retired sergeant majors of bibulous habits when she found the post contained nothing more than a tailor's bill.
Herbert will have some more of his funny remarks, I expect, when he comes home.
They were sitting at dinner.
I dare say. But for all that, the thing moved in my hand. That I'll swear to.
You thought it did.
I say it did. There was no thought about it. I had just...
He stopped abruptly.
What's the matter?
His wife did not answer. She was watching a man outside, a stranger who peered at the house uncertainly, as though trying to decide whether to enter. Thinking of the £200, she noticed that he was well dressed and wore a silk hat of glossy newness. 3 times he paused at the gate, then walked away again. The 4th time, he laid his hand upon it, and with sudden resolve, flung it open and walked up the path. At the same moment, Mrs. White placed her hands behind her back and quickly untied the strings of her apron. She slipped it beneath the cushion of her chair. She admitted the stranger, who seemed ill at ease, and brought him into the room. He glanced at her furtively, listening with distracted politeness as she apologized for the appearance of the room and for her husband's coat, a garment usually reserved for garden use. She waited, as patiently as she could, for him to speak. But at first, he remained silent.
I was asked to call.
He stooped and picked a loose piece of cotton from his trousers.
I come from Moore and Meggins.
The old lady started violently.
Is anything the matter? Has anything happened to Herbert? What is it? What is it?
Her husband stepped forward quickly.
There, Mother. Sit down, and don't jump to conclusions. You've not brought bad news, I'm sure, sir.
He looked at the stranger anxiously.
I'm sorry.
Is he hurt?
The visitor bowed his head.
Badly hurt. But he is not in any pain.
Oh, thank God. Thank God for that.
She broke off suddenly. The dreadful meaning of his words reached her at last, and she saw the confirmation of her fears in the man's averted face. She caught her breath, and turning to her husband, laid her trembling hand upon his. There was a long silence.
He was caught in the machinery.
Caught in the machinery, yes.
He stared out of the window, and taking his wife's hand between his own, pressed it gently, as he had done in the days of their courtship nearly 40 years before.
He was the only one left to us. It is hard.
The visitor coughed, rose, and walked slowly toward the window.
The firm wishes me to convey their sincere sympathy with you in your great loss. I beg you to understand that I am only their servant and merely obeying orders.
There was no reply. The old woman's face was white, her eyes fixed and staring, her breath scarcely audible. On the husband's face was a look such as his friend, the sergeant major, might have worn in his first battle.
I was also to say that Moore and Meggins disclaim all responsibility. They admit no liability at all, but in consideration of your son's services, they wish to present you with a certain sum as compensation.
Mr. White released his wife's hand and rose slowly to his feet. He stared at the visitor in horror.
How much?
£200.
Unconscious of his wife's shriek, the old man smiled faintly. He stretched out his hands like one who could no longer see, and fell, a senseless heap, to the floor. In the huge new cemetery, some 2 miles away, the old people buried their dead and returned to the house, steeped in shadows and silence. It had ended so quickly that, at first, they could scarcely grasp it. They waited in a dull expectancy, as though something else might yet happen, something that would lighten a burden too heavy for old hearts to bear. But days passed. Expectation faded into resignation, the hopeless resignation of the old, sometimes miscalled apathy. Often they hardly spoke at all, for there was nothing left to say, and the hours stretched on in weary length. About a week later, the old man woke suddenly in the night. He stretched out his hand and found the bed beside him empty. The room lay in darkness, and from the window came the sound of quiet weeping.
Come back. You will be cold.
It is colder for my son.
Her sobs faded. The bed was warm. His eyes grew heavy. He dozed fitfully, then slept until a sudden wild cry tore him awake.
The paw! The monkey's paw!
He started up in alarm.
Where? Where is it? What's the matter?
She stumbled toward him.
I want it. You've not destroyed it.
It's in the parlor, on the bracket. Why?
She laughed and cried together, bent down and kissed his cheek.
I only just thought of it. Why didn't I think of it before? Why didn't you think of it?
Think of what?
The other 2 wishes. We've only had one.
Was not that enough?
No. We'll have one more. Go down, get it quickly, and wish our boy alive again.
He flung back the bedclothes, his limbs shaking.
Good God, you are mad.
Get it quickly, and wish. Oh, my boy, my boy.
He struck a match and lit the candle.
Get back to bed. You don't know what you are saying.
We had the first wish granted. Why not the second?
A coincidence.
Go get it and wish.
He turned to her. His voice shook.
He has been dead 10 days. And besides, I would not tell you else, but I could only recognize him by his clothing. If he was too terrible for you to see then, how now?
Bring him back. Do you think I fear the child I have nursed?
He went down in darkness, feeling his way to the parlor, then to the mantelpiece. The talisman lay in its place. A horrible fear seized him, that the unspoken wish might bring his mutilated son before him before he could escape. Cold sweat broke upon his brow. He lost the direction of the door, felt round the table, groped along the wall, and reached the passage with the unwholesome thing clenched in his hand. When he returned, even his wife's face seemed changed, white, expectant, unnaturally so. He was afraid of her.
Wish.
It is foolish and wicked.
Wish.
He raised his hand.
I wish my son alive again.
The talisman fell to the floor. He stared at it, trembling, then sank into a chair as the old woman, her eyes burning, went to the window and raised the blind. He sat until the cold crept into him, glancing now and then at her rigid figure. The candle end guttered, threw restless shadows, and with one last flicker, went out. Relief, unspeakable, washed over him at the failure of the charm. He crept back to bed. A minute later, she came silently and lay beside him. Neither spoke. They listened to the ticking clock. A stair creaked. A mouse scurried through the wall. The darkness pressed close. At last, summoning courage, he struck a match and went downstairs for a candle. At the foot of the stairs, the match went out. He paused to strike another, and at that moment, a knock sounded at the front door. So quiet, so stealthy, It was scarcely a sound at all. The matches fell from his hand. He stood motionless, breath held, until the knock came again. Then he fled back to the room and shut the door. A third knock echoed through the house.
What's that?
A rat! A rat! It passed me on the stairs.
She sat upright, listening. A loud knock thundered through the house.
It's Herbert!
She ran for the door, but he was before her, gripping her arm.
What are you going to do?
It's my boy, Herbert. I forgot it was 2 miles away. Let go. I must open the door.
For God's sake, don't let it in.
You're afraid of your own son. Let me go. I'm coming, Herbert. I'm coming.
Another knock. And another. She tore free and ran downstairs. He followed to the landing, pleading as he heard the chain rattle and the bolt drawn back, slowly, stiffly.
The bolt. Come down. I can't reach it.
But he was on his hands and knees, groping for the paw, desperate to find it before the thing outside could enter. Knocks crashed through the house. A chair scraped against the door. The bolt creaked back. He found the paw and breathed his third and final wish. The knocking stopped, abruptly, though its echoes still rang in the house. The chair was drawn back. The door opened. A cold wind swept up the stairs. From below came a long, loud wail of disappointment and misery. He ran down to her side, then out to the gate beyond. The street lamp flickered on a quiet, deserted road.
And so, the story ends, not with triumph, but with silence. Because some horrors do not arrive with screams, they arrive through wishes, spoken carelessly and granted too completely. The Monkey's Paw is not a story about magic. It is a story about choice. The moral is simple and merciless. Interfere with fate or allow desire to guide you, and the cost may be more than you are prepared to pay. You have been listening to Enigma Renderings, a place where classic voices return, where English is learned through tension and tone, and where silence carries meaning. Until next time, dim the lights, still your thoughts, and listen carefully, because some wishes should never be spoken, and some doors are better left closed. Good night from Enigma Renderings,
where stories whisper through shadows.